So my name is Sam Sank. I was born and raised in London, specifically Northwest London. I grew up in Stanmore, lived in that area until I was 18. I went to a Jewish school, JFS, but in general, I had a very normal and happy childhood, lots of friends and family. But I always felt a connection to the land of Israel and the Jewish people. It's been our homeland for thousands of years, um, and we're the generation that's actually able to go and live there, unlike previous generations. So I went there regularly with my family on holidays. I went on school trips there, on a youth movement trips. I was very, very familiar with Israel, and felt a strong connection. And when I was 18, I decided to actually move there. Pretty much immediately joined the IDF, because when I moved to Israel, I automatically became a citizen, and all Israeli citizens at the age of 18 must go to the army. So I didn't move to Israel because I wanted to join the army. I moved to Israel because I wanted to live in Israel, and I'm still here. That decision is still relevant. But being Israeli means doing the army, so I understood that it was an amazing experience. I served for 3 years in the IDF as my mandatory service. Had an amazing experience. I learned Hebrew. I understood what it is to be Israeli. I would say that I went in a child and came out a man, both physically and mentally. Prior to October the 7th, I was going to reserve duty. Like it's mandatory to carry on as a reserve soldier, especially one that's been a combat soldier. I was in the paratroopers. I don't know if I mentioned that I'm a paratrooper. So every, let's say, 6 months on average, I would get called up for reserve duty. We woke up in the morning. We were woken up by sirens on that Saturday morning. So me and my fiance, we went to the bomb shelter here in our building. Um, Obviously, sirens is not the most unfamiliar thing living in Israel. So we didn't expect any, like, just from hearing a siren, we didn't think so something was so amiss, because it's quite regular to have sirens, unfortunately. But then our phone started blowing up of people messaging and saying something was up. We started watching the news from, I think it was like 6 a.m. And pretty, like, from watching the news, it was very clear that this was like nothing we'd ever seen before. Pretty unprecedented in Israel's history. And I turned to my girlfriend and I said, okay, we're in a war and I'm going to get called up. And I was like, what, we were called up on WhatsApp or a phone call, I don't remember. And by about 4 p.m. on October the 7th, I was already on base in uniform with a gun. On October the 9th, we were sent to Kfar Aza, which is one of the worst hit kibbutzim on the border with Gaza, and we were sent there to secure the area because there were still terrorists inside, and we killed the terrorists and secured the kibbutz and saw some of the atrocities that happened there. Some of the bodies and the smells and the sights were quite horrific. So I was there on the border pretty much a couple of days after. Then for the next 2 months, we were moved around a little bit. My unit, we were in the south, we were in the north. We weren't really deployed ever. It was always a constant question of what's going to happen to us. But then on December the 3rd, we were sent into Gaza. We were deployed to Khan Yunis, which is like the central southern city inside Gaza. And I was inside for 2 months. I had a couple of breaks in the middle to go home and shower, basically. And in one of those breaks, I proposed to my girlfriend, which was a very nice moment. My mum was also in town for it. But basically 2 months inside Khan Yunis, always moving closer to the center. The last week that I was inside, which was basically the final week of January, I was right by the refugee camp, which is a very, very dangerous place where probably Sinwar was until a few weeks ago, and where the hostages probably were as well. In answer to your question, yes, unfortunately, one of my friends from my company, as in my army company, not where I work, He was killed on the first day, on December the 3rd. That first day was particularly crazy. We entered Khan Yunis and we were ambushed, kind of thing. We walked on in by foot. We got to the point where we were supposed to be situated, and then kind of all hell broke loose, and there was a big firefight with explosions and rockets and gunfire over our heads. And my friend was killed, unfortunately, and another friend was shot in the back, and I was actually the one who evacuated him and saw the gunshot wound. We were in numerous houses throughout the 2 months, and we found a lot of guns and equipment in houses just by searching the place and finding lots of tunnel entrances. That was pretty much the main focus of our objectives while we were there, was to find the tunnels and the entrances, which were everywhere, honestly. Like everywhere you look, there was an entrance in the most innocent looking places. And we would find those tunnels entrances and then destroy the tunnels underneath. The experiences we had with terrorists were a rocket being fired, gunfire being fired, and then the terrorists would disappear again from the hole that it came out. The way I describe it is like whack-a-mole, the game where you're like banging the worms coming up. That's exactly what it was like. That they would appear, we would try to neutralize them, and if we didn't succeed, they would disappear again. And it was like that for pretty much the 2 months straight. When we were in by the refugee camp, there was lots of talk of things are happening now, like things that we are doing is having an effect on missions to get them out. But I guess that didn't happen because there's been one successful mission a few weeks, like last week, when I was in Rafah. How do I see the war going? Israel the IDF needs to be active in Rafah if it really wants to defeat Hamas. The reason is because there are tunnels in Rafah between Gaza and Egypt where all the weapons and equipment of Hamas goes through those tunnels. This is something that's been very well known, and the IDF will have to deal with that subject if it truly wants to defeat Hamas. If UNRWA or the UN or the world had listened to Israel from the very beginning and said, we are going to be going into Gaza to try and attack the terrorists who went into our country and slaughtered our people, please move all the civilians into areas ABC, which wasn't done. We truly want to defeat Hamas and secure a better future for ourselves and for the Palestinian people. Then Hamas needs to be destroyed as best it can. And right now they're in Hamas and our hostages are there and the tunnels are still there. So that's what will need to be done. Like I said, I trust the IDF to do everything possible to limit civilian damage, to move the people maybe northwards. I don't know what the plan is. Like that's my opinion. I have no idea what the strategy is. But the situation is that there still is work to be done, and we won't stop until we've defeated Hamas, because we cannot live with these people on our borders anymore. We did encounter civilians, and the policy was to bring them in. Like, first of all, wherever we were, there should be no people. So if somebody was in an area where we were, then there was something wrong. If we encountered a civilian, it was because they were entering that area on their own accord, or they'd got lost. I'd planned this engagement for a while, but the war kind of got in the way. I actually asked my future father-in-law's blessing for his daughter's hand when he drove me to base on October the 7th. It just felt like the right moment. Wasn't sure when I was going to see them again. But I had planned to propose in November. It ended up being in the end of December. I was in Gaza for 18 days straight, got released for a weekend home. And by coincidence, but not really, like my mum was also in town. So I just felt like it was the perfect moment, and proposed, where we had our first date, which was very cute. And we celebrated briefly, and then 2 days later, I was back inside Khan Yunis. And looking forward, like in March, I will start going back to my life as it was before October. A lot has changed, obviously, but going back to work and yeah, I'm hoping to return to some kind of normalcy, um, and a brighter future, whatever that means, and a wedding as well at some point. Yeah. For Jewish people around the world, it's not been an easy 4 months. Actually, just in New York now, I was literally harassed by protesters. They followed me home and screaming Nazi to my face, literally last week. I was called a Nazi and shouted, I hope you die to my face. And this isn't, they had no idea where I was in the last few months, right? If they knew where I was, I think steam would have come out their ears, but they just saw me going to like a Jewish comedy stand-up night in New York. I was invited by a friend. It was just a Jewish comedy stand-up night, and there were protesters outside, and they started following me home and literally abusing me. So for Jewish people around the world, it's not been an easy 4 months, and I don't see it getting better, unfortunately. But I felt that what I was doing, I was fighting for all of them, and keeping them safe, whether it's my mum in London, my girlfriend and her family here in Israel, or my friends in Tel Aviv. My mum is super supportive of me. I have a very close relationship with her. I'm an only child, like I said. So it was extremely difficult for her once the war started, and obviously I was called up immediately. And I can't imagine the kind of stress and worry that she was going through. First of all, I think the most important thing, and this is constantly on our minds and is the main focus of Israel right now, is to bring those hostages home. These are civilians who were taken from their homes, probably had family members killed in front of their eyes, and have had zero visits or communication of the outside world since that day. And we will do everything to bring our brothers and sisters home. That is the main objective of Israel. And in my eyes, it's more important than the destruction of Hamas. We need to bring those people home. And for people ripping down posters of hostages or things like that, it's really hard for me to fathom. Me personally, but also most people here in Israel, we we cry for every civilian death that happens in Gaza, the Palestinian people. We sympathize with their plight.